The first time my brother bought a house, my dad cried. Not at the closing. Not when he handed over the keys. At dinner, 3 weeks before, when my brother announced he put in an offer on a 4-bedroom colonial in Westfield, New Jersey. My dad actually teared up at the table, reached over, and squeezed his shoulder like he'd just told us he'd cured something. I was 26. I was sitting right there. Nobody looked at me. My brother's name is Ryan. He's 5 years older, and for as long as I can remember, he has been the family's North Star. Everything orbited around him. His grades, his college acceptance, his first real job at a consulting firm in Manhattan, his apartment in Hoboken, and then, finally, the colonial in Westfield with the wraparound porch and the finished basement. Every milestone got a dinner. Every dinner got a toast. My mom would make his favorite pot roast with those little red potatoes, and my dad would sit at the head of the table looking like the proudest man in Bergen County. I'm Laurel. I design brand identities for small businesses. At 26, I had been freelancing for 2 years out of a spare bedroom in my apartment in Jersey City, making decent money, but nothing that looked impressive from the outside. No title. No office building. No company name on a LinkedIn profile that anybody recognized. At family dinners, they asked me how the art stuff was going. I want to be honest here because I've had years to think about this and I don't want to make myself sound like a victim when the truth is more complicated than that. My parents weren't cruel people. They loved me, in the way parents love a child they genuinely don't understand. They grew up working class. My dad drove trucks for 20 years. My mom was a dental hygienist until her wrists gave out. And to them, stability meant a paycheck with a company name on it. Freelancing was a foreign concept. Owning your own thing was something other people did. People with connections. People who went to better schools. Ryan had gone to Rutgers on a partial scholarship and worked his way into consulting. That made sense to them. That had a shape they recognized. What I did had no shape, so they didn't really see it. At first it didn't bother me much. I was too busy to be bothered. Working nights, taking on every project that came my way. Building a portfolio, one logo and one brand guide at a time. A coffee shop in Montclair. A wedding photographer in Hoboken. A small law office in Summit that referred me to 2 more law offices. I wasn't getting rich, but I was getting good, and the work was coming in steadily enough that I felt something like momentum. But family dinners had a way of flattening all of that. So are you still doing the logo thing? My dad would ask. And the word still carried a weight he probably didn't intend. Like it was a phase. Like any day now, I'd come to my senses and apply somewhere. My mom was gentler about it. She'd ask if I was meeting people through the work. Meaning, was I networking? Meaning, was I trying to find a real job through the back door? I never told her that I wasn't looking for a back door. I had a front door. I had built it myself. Ryan, to his credit, never said anything openly unkind. He was just indifferent in the particular way that older brothers can be when they've already won. Not hostile, just uninterested. He'd talk about his projects, his clients, a work trip to Chicago, a bonus he'd gotten, and my parents would lean in and ask questions, and the table would come alive, and then the conversation would turn to me, and there'd be this brief, polite pause before someone changed the subject. I stopped going to some of those dinners, not dramatically. I didn't make an announcement, I didn't have a fight. I'd just text my mom on a Sunday afternoon and say I had a deadline, which was usually true. She'd say, "Okay, honey, we'll miss you." And I could hear in those 4 words that she understood something was off but didn't know how to name it. Then the Thanksgiving happened. I'm going to have to back up a little to explain the Thanksgiving because the thing that was said didn't come out of nowhere. In the months before, a few things had shifted in my life that I hadn't told my family about. The first was a client named Harlow Brands. They were a mid-size retail company out of Philadelphia. The kind of client that would have felt impossible to me 2 years earlier, and they'd found me through a referral chain that started with that law office in Summit. They hired me to lead a full rebrand, new identity, new visual system, new packaging across their whole product line, It was a 6-month engagement and it paid more than I'd made in my previous 2 years combined. I didn't tell my family, not because I was hiding it, but because by then I had learned that sharing good news with people who didn't understand what you did produced a specific kind of loneliness. I'd mentioned a smaller win once, a branding award from a design publication, and my mom had said, "Oh, that's fun," and gone back to cutting her chicken. I didn't want, "Oh, that's fun," for this. The second thing that shifted was that I started thinking seriously about buying a place. I'd been in the Jersey City apartment for 3 years and the rent had gone up twice. A friend who worked in real estate mentioned that with what I was earning, I might actually qualify for a mortgage, and something about hearing it said out loud made it feel real. I started looking. Quietly. The way I did most things by then. I hadn't told my family that either. So when Thanksgiving came, I drove to my parents' house in Paramus with a pie from a bakery in Journal Square, and a plan to just get through the meal without incident. Ryan was already there with his girlfriend Stephanie, who was lovely and completely unaware that she was sitting at the center of a dynamic she hadn't caused. My aunt and uncle were visiting from out of town. My cousin was there too, the one who was finishing his MBA at Seton Hall. It started the way it always started. My dad made too much food. My mom fussed about the table settings. My brother talked about a project at work. Something about a restructuring at a client site. And everyone listened carefully the way they always did. Then my cousin mentioned that he'd been looking at apartments in Hoboken and everything was insane right now, prices-wise, and my dad shook his head and said it wasn't like when he was young, and Ryan said the market had been wild since the pandemic, and Stephanie said they were thinking about refinancing, and somehow, in the way that Thanksgiving conversations have of rolling downhill, it landed on me. "What about you, Laurel?" my aunt asked. She meant it kindly. She always meant things kindly. "I've actually been looking at some places," I said. There was a pause. My dad put his fork down. Not dramatically, just set it on the edge of his plate. "Looking at places to buy," he said. The way he said it. The slight lift on the word buy, like he'd misheard me. "Yeah," I said. "I've been talking to a lender. I think it might actually be the right time for me." My mom glanced at Ryan. I saw it. A quick look, the kind that said, "Are you hearing this?" Ryan smiled. Not meanly, but the way someone smiles when a kid says something ambitious and sweet and slightly unrealistic. "That's a big step," he said. "I know," I said. "It's just," my mom started, and then she stopped. And then she started again, and this is the part I won't forget. "Sweetie, houses around here aren't cheap. Ryan's place was $380, and that was 2 years ago. You'd be looking at $400, $450 easy, and with freelance income." "Banks are picky about freelance income," Ryan said. Not unkindly. Informational. Like he was helping. "They want to see 2 years of steady," my dad began. "I have steady income," I said. Another pause. "Longer this time?" "I'm just saying," my mom said, and her voice had that gentle, careful tone that I'd come to dread more than anger. The tone that meant we're saying this for your own good. It might be worth waiting a little longer. Until things are more established. More established. I was 28 years old. I had a 6-month contract with Harlow Brands sitting in my email. I had a savings account that would have surprised every person at that table. But none of them knew any of that, and I found that I didn't want to defend myself. Not at that table. Not in that way. So I said, "Maybe you're right," and picked up my wine, and the conversation moved on. But before it did, I caught my brother's eye across the table. He had that same small smile. And he said, quietly, not to the whole table, just kind of under his breath in my direction, "Don't worry about it. You've got the creative thing going. That's enough." The creative thing. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the parking garage for a while before going upstairs. Not crying. Just sitting. Thinking about the word established and what it would take to be that in their eyes. And whether I cared. And the honest answer was that I did care. More than I wanted to. And I hated that I did. I went upstairs and opened my laptop and put in an offer on a condo in Montclair. Let me tell you about the condo. It's on the second floor of a converted Victorian near the center of town, 3 blocks from a coffee shop where I've had about 40% of my best ideas. It has original hardwood floors, a kitchen that was renovated in 2019, a small office nook off the main bedroom where I now have an actual desk instead of a folding table. It has crown molding. It has a clawfoot tub. It has a south-facing window in the living room that fills the whole apartment with light from about 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. It cost $415,000. I put $80,000 down. My lender, who had been working with self-employed clients for 20 years and knew exactly what documentation to pull, got me approved in 11 days. I closed on a Thursday in February. My friend Becca came with me. We signed everything at a conference table in a title company's office in Bloomfield, and when they handed me the keys, 2 of them, on a little ring, I held them for a second and didn't say anything. Becca cried. I laughed at her for crying. Then I cried too. I didn't tell my family. I know that sounds strange. Most people, you buy a house, you call your parents. But I had learned something in the years of quiet dinners and polite pauses, and are you still doing the logo thing? I had learned that sharing good news with people who hadn't believed in the work felt like asking for something I shouldn't need. I didn't want their retroactive pride. I didn't want the revised version of events where they'd always known I could do it. I just wanted the condo. I had it. That was enough. I moved in on a Saturday with Becca and her boyfriend helping, and I furnished it slowly over the spring. An armchair I found at an estate sale in Glen Ridge, a dining table from a small furniture maker in Brooklyn. I hung a print above the fireplace that one of my clients, a ceramic studio in Maplewood, had given me as a thank you. I set up my office nook with a proper monitor and a lamp and a small plant that I kept alive through sheer spite. Life went on. Work kept coming. Harlow Brands extended the engagement. I hired a part-time contractor to help with production work. A young designer named Felix who was straight out of art school and genuinely talented. And for the first time, my operation had a shape that other people could see. It was still just me and Felix, technically, but we had a name. Ren Creative. And a proper website and a client roster that included names people recognized. I still hadn't told my family. I went to Easter at my parents' house. I went to my cousin's graduation dinner. I went to a birthday party for my aunt in July where everyone stood in the backyard and my dad grilled and Ryan talked about a promotion he was up for, and I drank iced tea and smiled and nobody asked where I was living because they assumed I was still in Jersey City. I was not still in Jersey City. In September, something shifted in Ryan's life, though I didn't know about it until later. The consulting firm he worked for had been going through a rough year. They'd lost a couple of major clients. There'd been some restructuring. And Ryan's team had taken a hit. He didn't lose his job, but his hours got cut and a bonus he'd been counting on didn't come through. And because Ryan had bought his house at the top of his budget, banking on that bonus, the timing was difficult. I found out about all of this from my mom, obliquely, in a phone call in October. She didn't say Ryan is struggling financially. She said things like, "It's been a stressful season for your brother, and the market's been hard on a lot of people. And family is so important when things get uncertain." I listened. I said, "I'm sorry to hear that. I meant it." She paused, then said, "It would be good for you kids to lean on each other, you know." I said, "Of course." I didn't hear from Ryan. November came. My parents called, both of them, on a Sunday evening, which meant something was planned. My dad said they wanted to come see me. Just catch up. Maybe get dinner in the city. I said sure. Pick a Sunday. They said they were thinking they might come to my place instead. Hadn't seen it in a while. I let that land for a second. They had never been to my place in Jersey City. They didn't know I no longer lived in Jersey City. Actually, I said, "I moved." Silence. "You moved?" My mom said. "Yeah, back in February. I bought a place in Montclair." The silence stretched out in a specific way, different from the usual pauses. Heavier. "You my dad started. You bought a place? Yes, in Montclair. Yes. Another silence. And then, quietly, my dad said, Why didn't you tell us? I thought about that question for a moment. The true answer was long and would have required us to have a conversation we hadn't yet had and possibly never would. So I said I didn't want to make a big deal of it. My mom's voice had a careful quality when she spoke again. Laurel, sweetheart, that is a big deal. I know, I said. It worked out really well. I love it here. They were quiet. I could hear the television in the background at their house, one of my dad's sports shows. We'd love to come see it, my mom finally said. Of course, I said. Come any time. They came 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in early December. I made coffee and put out some pastries from the bakery down the street. My mom walked in the front door and stopped in the entryway and looked at the hardwood floors and the crown molding and the south-facing light, and didn't say anything for a second. My dad walked through to the kitchen, opened a cabinet, closed it, looked out the window at the street. Then he turned around and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not happiness, not guilt, something in between. This is a good place, he said. Thank you, I said. My mom hugged me. It lasted longer than our usual hugs. She didn't say I'm sorry we doubted you or we should have believed in you because she is not a person who says things like that, and honestly, by then, I didn't need her to. We had coffee. She asked about the clawfoot tub. He asked about the clawfoot tub. He asked about the commute. I told them about Ren Creative, about Felix, about the Harlow Brands extension. They listened in a way they hadn't always listened, not just waiting to redirect, but actually taking it in. Before they left, my dad stood at the door and cleared his throat in the way he does when he's about to say something he's rehearsed. You know, he said. I didn't always. I mean, I know I wasn't always with the freelance thing. He stopped. My dad is not a man who finishes sentences about feelings. It's okay, I said. I just didn't understand it, he said. I understand it better now. That was the closest we were going to get. And it was, I want to be honest, actually enough. Not everything I might have wanted, but enough. The call from Ryan came 2 days later. He called in the evening on a Tuesday, which was unusual. We didn't really call each other, just texted occasionally. I almost didn't pick up. Hey, he said when I answered. He had a careful, neutral tone that immediately put me on alert. Hey, I said. Small talk briefly. The holidays coming up. Cold weather. He asked about the condo. My parents must have told him. And said it sounded nice. I said it was. Then the careful tone shifted, almost imperceptibly. So, look, he said. I wanted to talk to you about something. Kind of awkward, but I wanted to ask you directly. Okay, I said. Things at work have been. He paused. It's been a hard year. The firm restructured and the bonus I was counting on for the mortgage didn't come through, and I've got some things I'm trying to sort out before the end of the year. I waited. Mom and Dad don't have it, he said. I already asked. And I know it's weird coming to you. But if you could lend me something short-term, even like 15 or 20, just to bridge the gap until Ryan, I said. He stopped. I'm not going to do that, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, okay. Not because I can't, I said. And I want to be clear that I said this calmly, without drama, because that's how I felt. Calm, clear. The way you feel when you've been building towards something for long enough that the moment arrives already fully formed. But because I spent years building something that nobody in this family thought was real, and I did it without anyone's help. I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm saying it because it's true, and I think you know it's true. Silence. I love you, I said. I hope you figure it out. But this isn't something I'm in a position to take on, he said. Okay. Again. Just that. Good luck with the mortgage stuff, I said. Seriously. Yeah, he said. Thanks. We hung up. I set my phone down on the kitchen counter and looked out the window at the street below. Bare December trees, a neighbor walking a dog, the warm light from the bakery on the corner. I waited to feel something bigger than what I felt, which was mostly just tired. Not triumphant. Not vindicated. Just Bex. Finished in some quiet way, with a chapter I'd been in for a long time. Felix texted me about a new client inquiry 10 minutes later. A restaurant group in Philadelphia looking for a full rebrand. Significant project, real budget. I wrote back, let's set up a call Monday. I think this is a good fit. I put the kettle on and sat at my desk in the nook off the bedroom under the good lamp and opened my laptop. Outside, the sky had gone the dark blue of early December evenings. The clawfoot tub was down the hall. The hardwood floors stretched through every room. The work was here. The life was here. I had built both of them, one project at a time in the years when nobody was watching. That was enough. That had always been enough. It just took me a while to stop needing them to see it. I've thought a lot about what actually happened in that story. Not the surface of it, not the Thanksgiving dinner or the phone call or the condo in Montclair, but the thing underneath all of it. The part that took me years to understand. What my parents did to me, they didn't do out of cruelty. That's the part that used to confuse me, because cruelty would have been easier to dismiss. They did it out of the limits of what they could see. My dad drove trucks for 20 years. My mom cleaned teeth until her wrists gave out. They built a life from things with names, job titles, hourly wages, company benefits. And when I showed up with something that had no name they recognized, they genuinely could not find a place to put it. That's not an excuse, but it is a reason. And understanding the reason was what finally let me put the whole thing down. Here's what I know about building something in silence. It changes you in ways that nothing else does. Every month I worked without anyone's validation. Every client I landed without being able to tell anyone who'd care. Every invoice I sent without someone saying good job. I was learning that the work had to be its own reward. That sounds like a cliché. It's not. It's actually one of the hardest things a person can learn, because we are wired to want to be seen by the people who raised us. Fighting that instinct. Choosing the work over the need for approval. Over and over and over. That's not a small thing. That built something in me that no one could take away, because no one had given it to me in the first place. Ryan called me asking for money and I said no. And I want to be honest about why. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't score settling. It was something quieter and more final than that. I had spent years making decisions with no safety net, calculating every risk myself, absorbing every setback without a cushion. Ryan had built his life assuming a bonus that didn't come through. Those are two different relationships with uncertainty, and I had learned mine the hard way. Bailing him out wouldn't have helped him learn his, and it would have cost me something I'd earned through years of not being rescued. There's a thing that happens when you stop waiting for people to believe in you. When you genuinely stop waiting, not as a performance but as a real interior shift. The work gets cleaner. Your decisions get clearer. You stop building for an audience that was never really watching and start building for something more durable. For yourself. For the life you're actually living, not the version you're hoping someone else will finally validate. Felix texted me about a new client the same night I got off the phone with my brother. A restaurant group, real budget. I wrote back immediately, not because I was trying to prove anything, but because that's what the work had always been. The thing that kept moving forward regardless of what was happening in any dining room in Paramus. That's the part I'd want anyone to take from this. Not the condo, not the closed door, not the moment my dad stood in my kitchen and almost said what he meant. The part I'd carry is this. The people who doubted you are not the measure of what you're capable of. They never were. The measure was always in the hours you kept, the decisions you made when no one was applauding, the way you showed up for the work even when showing up felt like shouting into a wall. I built Ren Creative in the years when nobody was watching, That was never a disadvantage. Looking back, I think it was the whole point.